Hi guys, in this video I'm going to be talking about a book which I was given to read when I first started working at Fighting Fit. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, written by Stephen Covey. It's all about helping you to become a better and more effective person in your personal and professional life. The first 3 habits focus on how you can become more effective as an individual, while habits 4 to 6 focus on how you can become more effective as part of a team. So let's get into it. Habit number 1, becoming proactive. There are 2 ways to live your life. The first way is to live a reactive lifestyle. People who live like this tend to not to plan ahead and just allow things to happen to them. For example, if you fell off a boat, would you rather have someone throw you a life ring or already have been wearing a life jacket? Of course we all know the answer to that, but a lot of people tend to have that same approach in all areas of their life. You might have met this person before who says things like, "I just can't catch a break," or "Why do things like this always happen to me?" The reason this happens is because they are focusing all of their attention on the wrong things. Most of the things a reactive person focuses on are all in an area called their circle of concern. So, what lies in this circle of concern? Things like the weather or the opinion of others, for example. The things that lie in this circle of concern are the things we have no control over, yet reactive people spend most of their time focusing in on these things rather than focusing on themselves and their own self-improvement. The second way to live your life is to live a proactive lifestyle. To become a proactive person, you need to shift your focus to another area we call the circle of influence. These are things that you have control over, such as health, education, relationships, and hobbies. The more you focus on these things, the more your circle of influence grows and the smaller your circle of concern becomes. Habit number 2, begin with the end in mind. When you set out to do anything in life, it is always important to highlight exactly where you want to go at the start. After you do this, you can then start to map out the specific steps it will take to get you to that place. If you only have a vague knowledge of where you want to go or what you want to do, then you may find yourself unintentionally straying off track to your goal. For example, let's just say the company you work for has a new higher paying position available. You know you want the position, but you don't exactly know how to work towards it. So, you start working harder in your area and becoming more helpful in the workplace and even put in more hours, thinking that you're a cert for this new position because of all these new steps you're taking to be a better employee. Then, when the time comes around for someone to be selected for the job, you don't get it. The reason for this is yes, you did work harder, and yes, you were climbing what you thought was the ladder of success to your new position. But, when you got to the top of the ladder, you realize you have the ladder leaning against the wrong wall. That is why it is important to be as specific as possible with your goal setting. You might end up just working busier rather than harder. Habit number 3, put first things first. This habit is essentially all about becoming great at time management. Having good time management is an essential trait to possess in your personal and professional life. We all tend to give our time and attention to 4 different categories. Number 1 is things that are urgent and important. These are crisis scenarios like a fire or a health scare. If we live life in this area, then we are reactive people. We've allowed these things to build up until it was spilled over and became an emergency that needs to be dealt with straight away. The next area is where most people spend their time, which is dealing with things that are urgent but not important. These are all the little interruptions in our day. We think they are urgent because they are other people's priorities, but in reality, they are not that important to us, such as a neighbor asking you to help them out with a garden project, for example. Number 3 is the things that are not urgent and not important. These are trivial things that are essentially a waste of time, like watching television or going on your phone at work. In the long term, if you spend too much time in this area, you may find yourself without a job and becoming dependent on other people. The 4th and last area is things that are not urgent but important. This is where most of our focus should be. These are things we know we should be doing but let them take a back seat because they aren't immediately urgent. These are things like our health and our relationships. If we all focus more on this area, then there will be less of an occurrence of emergencies or a crisis. Habit number 4 is to develop a win-win or no deal mentality. The main thing to learn from this habit is that for you to win, someone else doesn't always have to lose. Obviously this rule does not apply to everything in life, but when dealing with people, it is a very important trait to possess. For example, imagine you buy a new phone and you decide to sell your old phone to a friend. This scenario can play out a few different ways. You can insist on a price your friend thinks is unreasonable and leaves that friend feeling hard done by. Your friend could offer you an amount of money that you feel is too little, which would leave you feeling hard done by. This leads to an argument where instead of discussing the sale, you begin to attack each other's character. The best way to handle a situation like this is to be able to agree on a win-win or no deal mentality. That way, neither you or your friend feel hard done by and can walk away from the transaction without feeling betrayed by each other. There are certain requirements to be able to have this mentality. The first being integrity. You should always say what you mean and mean what you say. If you can't do this, then people will see you as untrustworthy or all talk, as the saying goes. The next trait is maturity. The reason maturity is so important in a situation like this is that you need to be able to have the courage to look for a win for yourself, but also to have the consideration to try and get a win for your friend also. Finding the right balance between the two is essential to having a win-win mentality. The last thing is to have an abundance mentality. No matter what area of life you're talking about, there is plenty out there for everyone. For example, Fighting Fit is one out of thousands and thousands of gyms in the world. It's also one out of dozens in the surrounding area. Does that mean that we hate all other gyms and try to make sure we have more clients than them? No. If you have the right mentality, everyone can win and everyone can be successful. Habit number 5 is to seek first to understand and then to be understood. When someone tries to discuss a problem they are having with something, we give advice before actually understanding what the problem is in full. We prescribe advice for a problem without actually diagnosing the problem first. This all comes down to how well of a listener you are. There are 5 levels of listening. The first level is to ignore. As you all know, ignoring means to not listen at all. The second is pretending to listen while not actually taking in what people are saying to you. The third, selective listening, or essentially listening to what you want to hear. Fourth is reflective listening. In this case, while thinking we're being good listeners, we're actually taking what someone is saying and comparing it to our own lives. Not everyone's situation is the same, so we cannot compare one person's problem to our own problems. The fifth and most important level of listening is empathic listening. To listen to someone empathically is to listen with the intent to understand intellectually and emotionally what someone is trying to say to you. When we talk about empathic listening, there is 4 stages. The first and most immature stage of empathic listening is to simply mimic what the person has just said to you. For example, if a friend was to say to you, "Oh, I've had it with my husband," you would simply respond, "Oh, you've had it with your husband." The second stage is where you would attempt to rephrase what you were being told. So when your friend says, "Oh, I've had it with my husband," you would then say something like, "Oh, you're sick of your husband." Again, this stage won't get you or your friend anywhere with their problem. The third stage is when your friend says, "Oh, I've had it with my husband," you would respond by reflecting the feeling of what they said. So you might say, "I see you're feeling a bit upset." Now, the fourth and most effective stage of empathic listening is a combination of stage 2 and 3. In this stage, when your friend says, "Oh, I've had it with my husband," you would respond by rephrasing and also reflecting the feeling of what they've said. If you were to continually rephrase and reflect the feeling of what you're being told throughout the conversation, you can make your friend feel like you understand their problem and are trying to listen and help them out with their situation. Now you're both looking at the problem together and can begin to look at solutions rather than going back and forth without actually understanding where each person is coming from. The 6th habit discussed in the book is synergy and the ability to synergize. By definition, synergy is the interaction or cooperation of 2 or more organizations, substances, or other agents to produce a combined effect greater than the sum of their separate effects. In order to achieve synergy in any group setting, whether it be work or personal life, you have to be able to effectively use habits 4 and 5 of having a win-win mentality and also seeking first to understand and then to be understood. Synergy is accomplished when we value the difference of opinion that each person in a particular situation brings to the table, while also working towards an alternative solution together rather than bring each other down by demeaning and criticizing each other. By being able to communicate and understand each other correctly, we can create synergy. The 7th and final habit is to constantly sharpen your saw. By sharpen your saw, I mean we need to constantly be trying to improve ourselves and move forward in each area of our lives. The classic example of sharpening your saw is the man trying to saw down a tree. He spends hours sawing with little result. When a passerby says, "Hey, why don't you take a break and sharpen that saw? You would be done a lot quicker." To which the man responds, "I don't have time to sharpen my saw, I have to cut down this tree." Now, I'm sure we can all see from the outside the irony of that, but it's not always as obvious to the person in question. So, how do we sharpen our metaphorical saw? There are 4 different key areas to focus on. The first area is physical health. The most common excuse people give for not working on their physical health is that they have no time, while in fact, they're just exhibiting poor time management. Everybody has the same 24 hours in a day. While it is true that we don't all have the same schedule, everyone has 30 minutes across a whole day where they find themselves free. If you're to spend less time browsing social media or even get out of bed 30 minutes early, we all have the time to work on our physical health. It just comes down to what you prioritize. The second area is spirituality. This can be achieved through meditation, prayer, or just general thought. It is vitally important to seek to understand ourselves, where we are in our own headspace, and where we want to go in life. The third area is your mental health. Some would say this is the most overlooked area. Depression and anxiety is at an all-time high in the world today because people struggle to address issues that they may be struggling with, choosing instead to bottle things up and let them fester. We should constantly be trying to expand our minds and educate ourselves in areas that help us to achieve our goals in life. The last area is our social and emotional health. We should always be practicing habits 4, 5 and 6 in our personal and social lives. The key to living a long and healthy life is having a purpose. It's having those meaningful tasks and projects that excite you and greatly benefit you and others around you. The first 3 habits teach us how to become a more effective person by helping us to exhibit more independence, while habits 4 to 6 help us to become more effective by helping us to exhibit more interdependence. Habit 7 helps us to become a more all-round effective person and to be constantly improving every area of our lives for the better. The process of your journey through these 7 habits is that they are self-renewing and are intended to be lived, not just read. Once we learn them, commit to them and do them, we should be learning them, committing to them and doing them all over again. This ensures we are constantly building on the effectiveness of our past selves rather than stagnating or even worse, moving backwards in life. Thanks for listening guys. I would definitely recommend giving this book a read. You won't regret it.